Hello everybody, and welcome back to another game of the Neverhood. So yeah, today we are mostly gonna do the password puzzle. Yeah, so here you go. And yeah, we exit out. Hold on a second. But first, before we use it, we need to go to that little puzzle thing that shut off the neo-purple signs. It's a flashy cutscene. Can you stop moving it? Can you stop moving it? You're the flash. Disgusting boy. Snitch. Just walking forward. Bruh. Bye. Wait, wrong time. Oh, great, another FMV cutscene. Oh, hold on a second. Yeah, see if the Willie's radio thing is still working. Danger, don't do it the train, you will die. I won't do it. Yeah, I think this is the way. Do my mom. Real clay. Buddy, get over there. We already did. It's actually country. But don't worry, very soon I'm going to have a new series about bootleg NES games, mostly Sinjin Naujin ones. But that's only if the Virtual Pi can work. Okay, that's only if the Virtual Pi can work. I'm not going to guarantee you what the space pen does. Yeah, there was a secret in this game where apparently the space button, if done in a building, can teleport you there. But I think that's only with the Windows 95 version. Though, hold on a second, let me see. FMV! Because I pointed that out, it's NES. Going inside this room. Hold on a second. More weird ambient sounds. Oh, there is some real clean. I know, right? All done by hand stuffing the pictures. That's gonna do. FMV. What the? Random mix of sounds. Oh, hang on a second. The Hall Kings. I'm probably gonna mess up. And I messed up. Hold on a second. Here comes the idle animations. There you go. And now his head is gonna grow big. Oh yeah, here's the idle animations. Wait for it. Here it is. Bruh. This is probably gonna take a couple minutes just to cycle through all the idle animations. Yeah, here comes a lot of animations because I was just gonna do more extras. Oh, they're just repeating exactly the same one. It will be random. Get out of here. Okay, hurry up, claim it. Hurry up, claim it. Let's see if he has something new to say. Because there's the other measure.
I gave it the Hall of Records. The
No.
guy goes and he keeps coming back. I don't get it. I wish he'd just go away. He'll probably do it again.
Ha 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 ha. Nice, buddy. Man, at least the PlayStation version goes faster. But it's in Japanese. And yes, there's an English translation for it, but why would I want to do that? Mushroom guy. And here's me trying to be a failure at the puzzle. This is gonna take a while. Oh yeah, a whole load of puzzles. Okay, we'll come back to that a little bit later in another video, but to keep this video at least somewhat long, I say somewhat, I'm going to read you another thing from the Hall of Records, and this time, the most depressing one, which would be Ottoborg. Why? Okay, just get ready for a lot of deaths. After these FMVs, and also I'm going to be counting the deaths because it's like a another she also wants to break those destinies. Like it's currently about that. Do-do-do-do. So yeah, for at least the next we'll do the Hall of Records. Though you cannot hear it, there's something outside. And also, if the retro pie does work out, I'll guys get to show you something very unique, okay? The Neverhood, but on the Sega Genesis. Currently I would say uncle, is currently working on in Russia right now. Yeah, Russians always do the best remakes. But first, the Hall of Records. Americans. Hot gravy now. Sorry, upstairs. It's raining outside. Cannon and building. Oh yes, I'm gonna read the most depressing parts, and I'm gonna count how many times they die. Okay, you can also count as many times as one of his creations die. Remember, there were 7. So, okay, today I'm gonna read Ottoborg's chapter. It is written. How Hobart created Neverhood. Preamble. This is gonna take a while. Abdillah. You can speed this up if you want. Bird, bird. Oh yeah, this is probably one of the longer ones. And there's Bird Bird. Oh yeah, then comes Numeron. Here we are at Ottoborg. Ottoborg. Critter made a king named Ottoborg, designed to be happy and full of joy all day. Robots were a subject that Ottoborg had done a lot of research on, so it was only natural that he made 3 robots to help him make some little houses. The robots were named Appy, Togar, and Bill. Appy was good at digging, Bill was good at building, and Togar was good at painting. That is why it is said today that if anyone is a good painter, he is Togar. In a very careless way, Ottoborg made 7 sons to live in his new houses. The boys' names were Hypen, Hypen Nupin, Petron Alfonza, Willie Trombone, the one that only survived, Aloha Al, Doridus Harris, whose nickname was Creaker, Hondo, and Ed. Ottoborg's sons were easily identified by the loop formed on top of each of their heads. Sometimes, when they walked along, they would hook their head hoops on branches and hang there for days. Petra was tired of getting his head hooked onto things that he cut off his head off, which proved to be fatal for his death. Ottoborg had forgotten to hold his work together with gravity. Oops. So one day his world fell apart, and chunks and his 7 sons and 3 robots floated aimlessly across creation. Hypen's chunk of land got caught in the tail of the comet Perigee, named Pegor because it decreased in size during each orbit. The tail of the Perigee was full of seeds because the comet once passed through the atmosphere of the planet Burp. Hypen cultivated his chunks so that he could grow flowers. He loved flowers and how happy and festive they can make a place. Often he would make wreaths of some of the flowers to decorate the lupin on his head. Since he was the only one of his brothers with a nose, it seemed especially fitting that he was where to place Hypen Nupin's chunk of land should be. He grew and I move over to the next one, extremely amount of flowers. But after a few years was not enough to satisfy his growing craving for flowers. His deepest burning desire was to be the king of flowers, to have no rival in growing flowers. He actually did not know any of anyone else who was growing flowers, but his unfettered imagination went wild, and he thought that there must be others who were cultivating and growing huge fields of flowers on the many planets and worlds he passed. Year after year, Hypen worked the soil of his chunk of land and tried and get to produce more and more flowers. He developed fertilizers and plant foods. He grew nothing but move over to the next one. Flowers, though there were plenty of other types of seeds he could have planted. If he did notice some other type of plant growing amongst his flowers, he would violently ripped it from the ground, cursing and tearing it, like saying the B word, to shreds, then throwing it onto his compost pile. It was so upsetting to him that he would have to lie down for a nap afterwards. But no matter how many flowers the land produced, it was never enough for Hypen. It almost seemed that the chunk of land was desperately trying to please its obsessed master, starting itself year in, year out to produce more flowers than it had the previous season. For many centuries, in fact, it did outperform itself. Each year, a dozen or so more flowers were produced, and Hypen asked, "Is that all?" Then the yield began to decrease. The land was simply overworked, and it needed to rest. Hypen reacted by pressing the land near harder and harder to yield more. It was aggrieved to no end. The more he did to increase the yield of flowers, the less the land was able to produce. Eventually, as each season went by, the yield decreased, first 10, then 100-fold, and so on. Most of the land lay barren and still. If Hypen found anything, move on to the next one, other than a flower growing, he would pull it out by the roots and throw it away into the compost pile. As the land grew grey and stir, Hunter wasted away also. A loop on the top of his head drooped like a deflated tire. His desire to make his clunk of land a happier place with flowers had died. He spent his last days worrying and hovering over the last few flowers and struggled desperately to grow and to mature in the dust. He could not afford the time it took to weed off the desolate fields, but only a few spurny vines grew here and there, and then depleted the soil away. When the last flower died, so did Hypen Nupin. So basically, that's second death. Willie's chunk of land flew off into space, with Willie still inside his little red-roofed house. Ottoborg never saw Willie again. What Ottoborg did not know, which this wall does, was that Willie's chunk of land drifted into the most dangerous part of the space. You see, They were these nasty creatures called victoids that flew about looking for food. Victoids have a giant nasty mouth full of giant nasty fangs, and of course the hair that they were covered with was nasty. Anyway, four victoids stumbled upon poor Willie Trombone, who was alone, just floating through space for quite some time. Willie, being the friendly type, held out a friendly hand and beckoned them, "Hey, hairy friends!" The victoids screamed with glee when they saw Willie's yellow super flesh. They figured that he was not a fool, and they would have to trick him before they could eat him. They were wrong. For Willie Trombone was a fool above all the other fools, and all the time they spent trying to trick him only gave the drifting giant big robot Bill enough time to go arrive. Bill reached out with his mighty 3 arms and grabbed the floating chunk of land and hoisted himself up. Bill grew horrified as he saw his creator's son about to be devoured by vicious victoids. That evening, Willie Trombone dined on victoids, saving their petals to use as blankets on especially cold evenings. Well, Willie and Bill became close friends, and they enjoyed each other's company for a long time, floating in space. Until one day they saw something very far away, something like a being in distress. A low owl kept a journal after ottoborg's world broke into chunks. Here is a copy, the only known surviving excerpt from that diary. My chunk of land has whooshed through a mysterious cloud of blue, gas. The cloud is larger than some worlds I have seen. I made a spur of the moment decision to jump off the chunk and onto the gas. There is such a clutter of junk on the outer surface of the blue gas that it is virtually solid, yet kind of springy. Oh, I am tired. I think I will lay myself down to take a snooze on the junk that clutters the surface of this blue gas, for I have not slept since before Ottoborg's world fell apart. I do not know how long I was sleeping, but I woke up because I felt something tiny and creepy crawling on my knee. I reached down and swatted it with my hand. There I just felt a yellow spot of goop. When I brought my hand to see what kind of bug it was, then I heard my weirdest whiny-miny noise I have ever heard. I looked up and around and behind me, but I did not see anything. Then I looked up and down the ground. I found myself surrounded by very little beings. Some were laying down. I guess they must have fainted after seeing their own squash. But by my big hand, I knew they were not bugs. Because they were all staring at me, and because they were not all crawling over me, or biting me, or injecting their eggs under my skin to incubate there and hatch later. These are very teeny tiny beings indeed. When I compare them to myself, the tallest is only as big as my thumb. Each tiny being has a great head in comparison to the rest of its body. In fact, the head takes up as much space as the body. The two remarkable features of the head are the size of the head compared to the little body, and almost perfect roundness. It is like a melon on a silver. Each being's head has a mouth, but other than that, there's only one other facial feature. Their globe heads are divided into an upper and lower hemisphere by a dark line at the equator. I perceived this dark line to be all next one in one. The eyes, ears, nose of these beings, since they employ them much in their observation of myself, and with their mouths also in the communication with each other. I was very hungry, and I had traveled on my own chicken land for 40 days and 40 nights, or something like that. My first thought was to eat a handful of the little beings, but they held up their hands and warned me off and wailed in high-pitched whiny shrieks. Sorry. The little beings understood that I was famished from the disgusting rumble noises that my stomach made, seemingly from thin air. They produced tiny, delicate green crystals in great abundance. In my hand, they appeared as so many granules of green sugar, except not gritty, Rather, these were gummy and had a flavor that made me think of green thoughts. As fast as I would pop a handful of the green stuff into my mouth, the little beings would bring more. They would also bring me a cup. There would be a tub of to them it would be a tub of green liquid, which after I drank it, I perceived to be the wine made from the green gummy crystals. It had a very fine flavor and made me think of rather mellow green thoughts. As much as the big heads, my name for them, speak to me, I never comprehend a single word they say, but I must help them drink their wine. One tiny being who does most talking seems to be in charge, since the others are always paying attention to him, and they jump to their action after he speaks. I suppose this is the father of these tiny beings. While he was speaking, he also did strange dances. He looked really stupid, waving his arms about like that. After a few weeks of the father trying to talk to me, some others of these big heads dressed in tight, colorful clothing came to bother me. Some rode up, wheeling around and around inside the loop of my head. One had the nerve to bounce up and down my lips. I should have just opened my mouth and swallowed him whole. The only thing I did not really mind was the three beings that did flips and somersaults on the three spikes that stuck out of my chest. That was kind of fun. Days and days of the same thing now, eating green gummy crystals, drinking green wine, and watching the father guy, my name for him, flail about like he does and listens to his high-pitched whining. Usually I just sit and smile at him, but when my cheeks get sore, I imitate whatever he's doing. If he nods, I nod. If he shakes his head, I shake mine. I will not write in this diary unless something weird or exciting happens. How long have I been here? It's very hard to keep track of time when nothing new happens. Once again, the father guy came out to bother me with his high-pitched whining, although it seems more favored this time. He kept pointing off away from where he sat, and he stood up and stomped about how always pointing. Looked like a dance to me. As far as I knew, it was a dance, since I had never seen any of these little beings dance. So I stood up and danced. I tried to make steps in my dance like the father guys, but he was not at all pleased with my imitation. I was busy trying to perfect my dancing steps when I was suddenly hit from all sides by food. I assumed that was part of the strange dance to try and catch as many of the food as I could. In my mouth, I was doing pretty well, if I do say so myself. I suppose I have an advantage over the little beings, since my mouth is so much bigger than any of theirs. Perhaps why I was chosen for the special part of the dance. Most of the big heads joined the crowd that was hold on a second. Throwing the food at me, till I was finally could not keep up with the torment of food. I did not mean to criticize, but many of the beings did not have very good aim. I was ducking and jumping, doing my best to get my face into place to catch the food, but a lot of it just got splattered against my body. A lot more just landed on the ground, so that I stepped in a bunch of it as I moved around. And still, more of the big heads came out where they all were and joined me in the food throwing. I felt a little ridiculous since I could not possibly keep up the pace of dance, and the little guys really showed no sign of letting up. By now, a big circle of the beings surround me, all of them whining and shrieking, some chanting. I suppose I decided to step out of the circle and figured I would get another chance to this dance right sometime later, but even after I stepped out of the circle, they continued to throw food at me. I didn't even try to catch it. I really wanted to practice this dance and try to do better the next time. As I stepped further away to get out of their throwing range, they finally stopped. They stopped their whining and shrieking chant too, and soon the big heads were cheering and clapping. I turned back to accept their applause. I think they appreciated that I tried so hard to catch all the food, because as soon as I turned back, they started throwing more. I did not want to dance this food catching dance anymore. I turned my back to the big heads with the big round heads and walked away as fast as I could. Before I knew it, I was walking up to another group of tiny beings. These beings remained silent as I approached, or worming or shrieking or moaning. These beings are just as tiny as the first beings I lived amongst, but they had different heads. Their heads seemed to be the right size for their little bodies. Their faces are featured except for a long needle-like proboscis. These tiny beings seem to use this proboscis or proboscis for all their communication and all their senses: sight, smell, taste, hearing, feelings. Some of these beings pointed their needle noses here and there over my body as I approached, but most kept them pointed at my feet. Just before I stepped in front of the needle noses, my name for them, they began clapping. By the time I actually stopped, they were cheering and whooping and jumping and up and down. This went on for quite a while. Then they began to quiet down and the crowd began to split down the middle. I noticed one needle nose coming through the crowd to stand in front of me. This needle nose seemed to have the respect of all the other needle noses because they all gave their attention to him. As he stood in front of me, I could tell because all their needle-like noses were pointed at him. Instead of me, he must be their father guy. After looking over a while, the father guy started speaking at me, and I did not understand anything that he said to me, but I smiled at him the entire time he spoke to me. I kept smiling at them all. After the father guy finished, I was trying to think of something to do. I decided to say something back to them. "Well, it's really nice," I said, "for all of you to come out to greet me today. You know I couldn't stand for any more of that food-throwing dance that the big heads do. You don't have a food-throwing dance, do you? Do you guys understand me?" I smiled some more after I finished and waited for something to happen. All the needle noses did was turn around and walk away. They kept looking over their shoulders as they left, but I did not seem to care if I followed or if I stayed where I was. I decided I might as well stay where I was. I sat down and waited to see what would happen. For days and days I sat there and nothing happened. At first the needle noses kept looking over their shoulders at me, but after a few days seemed to forget they seemed to forget I was there. After a week or so of being ignored, I was hungry, so I followed some of the needle noses around as they went about their daily chores, and every so often they would look around their shoulders at me. Mostly what they did all day was spit on the ground. It was a disgusting sight. They would from line and walk through the fields and spin on the ground day after day, all the time spinning day after day. No matter where I was, no matter what I observed them, they were always spinning. I did not know why I did not notice it before. Then I noticed all their food came from the fields they'd been spinning all this time. Fruit from spit. Now that they were harvesting, they had time to notice me. For the first time since I arrived in the Needle Nose land, they offered me food. How could I accept it after seeing them spit all the time and produce the food? I ran away sickened to my stomach. After what I am sure must be something like 100 years, I could not take living among these tiny weeds anymore. I was being starved by the needle noses, and I did not want to go back to the big heads to have them throw more food at me during their crazy dance. I felt defeated and I hung my head in dejection. Now, since I was standing on a cloud of blue gas, as the gas swirled and spun, I could often see through the gas, or at least deep into the center of it. Something fuzzy at the distance of the other side of the cloud caught my eye. The shape grew a little larger and a little more defined as it came close. All at once I clapped my hands and whooped for joy. I did not need a crystal clear view of the object to recognize it was the very chunk of land that had been broken off of ottoborg's world, and brought me to this miserable place. At once I realized what was happening. The chunk of land was caught in a circular orbit, and the blue gas must be going in a straight line into its octilla. I took it through 2 points in that circle. I cried out, for sure I am the luckiest of all of Ottoborg's son. Not yet. Carefully, as it passed through the cloud of blue gas, I jumped off the springy surface of the debris onto my chunk of father's world. I have not been on the chunk of land for about 3 minutes. Been on the chunk of land for about 3 minutes, long enough to make this latest injury into my journal. Gee, it's great to be back. Oh my god, I hope I never. Here, the excerpt of the diary ends abruptly. It is said the chunk of land that Ola was on suddenly smashed into a dirt cloud. Died a third time. Collided with head-on. Both the chunk and the clod were traveling at great speeds upon impact. Nothing was ever seen of Alaha again. Krieger's chunk of land was the biggest and was full of lakes. There were actually more land covered by water than not. Krieger survived many centuries on the chunk, long enough to learn how to create and build great replicas of spoons and butter knives, enormous buckets filled with oversized sesame seeds, and huge loaves of bread, among other things. Krieger used the soil of the land on his chunk and as a material for his sculptures. Wherever he would get tired of looking at one of his colossal sculptures, he would just throw into the lake. Each of the colossal sculptures displaced enormous amounts of water, covering up a little more dry land each time one was thrown into a lake. When he was not sculpting, Krieger would be out scrutinizing one of his previous sculptures. He was very critical of his work. He would always conclude as the sculpture did not communicate the concept that he was impetus behind the work, or he saw a hair or a bug sticking out the clay. In any case, he was always frustrated. None of his work seemed to express his vision just the right way. He could not quite put his finger on the problem, but his general feeling was that it had to do with the size of the sculpture. If only it was a little bit bigger, he would often say to himself, then he would heave the thing into the nearest lake. His mind was focused immediately on making each new sculpture larger than the previous one, whether it be a giant replica of a red pot bulb or mostly empty jar that had been sitting in the back of a valley for 8 weeks. Eventually he spent little time examining his finished works, but with an explanation of disgust he would browse through into the nearest lake, which after a while seemed to be conveniently closer and closer. Just as soon as he was done and immediately started on the next one. The replicas were by this time so large that he had to climb on them to work on the upper parts. The largest sculpture Krieger The largest sculpture Krieger ever completed was of a baby's arm holding an apple. It was such a titanic work that he had to use spikes and ropes to get up. Where he finished, he rappelled down the back of the arm. He backed up to get a good look at it, but could not back up very far since he was on a beach. Again, his disgust and frustration overcame him as he said, "No, no, no, that's not it all." And then Krieger rushed at the base of the sculpture to push it into the water. He barely budged it, but since it was top heavy, since the apple was at the top, was enormous, so this was enough motion to cause the sculpture to fall over. Krieger turned to start on a new sculpture. He had in mind a great pair of tongs digging into a bucket of sand, and he never saw the tidal wave that fell upon him before its death. Hondo's chunk of land ended up in the back of a giant animal that lived on a desert on an undocumented planet. Hondo seemed to like the animal enough, and he was so small that the animal did not detect his existence. There was not much that Hondo could tell about the animal. It looked like it was a colossal beast compared to Hondo. He took many survey journeys that went on for days and days across the top of the beast to see if it looked different from other locations. As he walked, he noticed the color of the ground changed. Presumably he would be passing over areas that was brown, then 15 feet or so further he would pass over an area that was yellow. The surface that he walked on was hard and mostly smooth, but it was turned into short flat little hills over where he came to the edge. He was looking around, and he almost fell off. He got down on his stomach to look over the edge. There was nothing between him and the ground, which was very far away. If he had jumped, the fall would have broken every bone in his body. We're almost near the end. He was on the lip of an overhang, and he reached under to see if he could feel how far back it went. but the overhang went straight back and kept going. Then he carefully lowered his head over to look and see how far back this overhang went. He could not see it through. There was so much dark shadow he could only see about as far as his hand reached. Hondo got up and decided to walk directly away from the edge. He grew very tired almost immediately, and as service began setting right away. It took him a day to reach the summit, so he slept there. In the morning, Hondo was able to see very far from the top of the animal. The sky was all blue and the land was all beige. He saw that the highest hilly part of his animal sloped down in all directions, around from where he stood. Ed's Chuck just spun in place forever. And there's Ottoborg. Anyway, guys, that was about it. I will see you on the next Neverhood one, or one where I'm going to do an NES bootleg, or maybe even Armkrog. But, bye!